Nobody warns you that the woman you die for might be the same woman lying to your face every single night. I didn't figure it out all at once. It came in pieces, small ones, quiet ones, the kind you keep excusing because you're 62 years old. You've buried a wife, raised 2 kids alone, and for the first time in 11 years, you finally feel like a man again instead of a widower. Her name was Renata, and for 16 months, I thought she was the second chance I didn't think I still got to have. But I'm getting ahead of myself. For those of you just finding me, my name is Walter Hutchins. Everybody calls me Walt. I own 3 hardware stores across the Lehigh Valley in Pennsylvania, Hutchins & Sons, though it's really just me and my boy Cole running the flagship in Bethlehem now. My father started the first store in 1968 with a bank loan and a stubborn streak. I grew up sweeping those floors. Money was never the point in our family. What you did for the people around you, that was the point. My late wife, Dottie, and I raised our kids in the same house I still live in, out past Emmaus. Sunday dinners aren't optional in my family, never have been. My daughter Faith drives up from Allentown every week with her husband and the grandkids, and my son Cole lives 10 minutes away and shows up whether he's invited or not, mostly because there's always a pot roast, and he knows it. We're loud, we're close, and we don't do anything halfway. So when I tell you I met Renata at a Rotary Club fundraiser in Bethlehem and was completely gone on her within 2 months, you have to understand what that means coming from a man my age. I don't fall easy. Not anymore. I'd been divorced from grief for a long time, if that makes any sense. Dottie passed of cancer when I was 51. I dated here and there, over the years, nothing that stuck. Nothing that felt like more than filling a Tuesday night. Renata felt different from the first conversation. She walked into that fundraiser in a green dress, laughed at a joke my buddy Frank made about the raffle tickets, and then turned to ask me, really ask, not just make conversation, about the hardware business, about my father, about how I'd kept it running after Dottie died. Nobody had asked me that in years. We dated for 4 months before I introduced her to my kids. Cole liked her immediately. Faith took a little longer, the way daughters do with their fathers. But by month 6, she was bringing Renata along to the grandkids' soccer games like it was nothing. I proposed on the boardwalk in Cape May on a Tuesday evening in October, ring in my pocket since breakfast, hands shaking like I was 25 again. She said yes before I finished the sentence. Cole cried when I called him. Faith said, "Well, it's about time you let yourself be happy, Dad." My late wife's sister, Aunt Ro, who still checks in on me every single week, said she'd known something was coming for months. To all of you just settling in, welcome. Hit that like button, drop a comment telling me where you're tuning in from tonight, and get comfortable, because this story is going to take you somewhere. Here's what I need you to understand about Renata before anything else. She wasn't cold. She wasn't distant. She was warm, funny, quick to laugh, and she made me feel like a man who still had good years left in him instead of one just running out the clock. So when the subject of her family came up, and in my world, family comes up fast, because we don't know how to talk about anything else, her answer didn't strike me as a warning sign. It struck me as a wound. "My parents and I don't speak," she told me one night, about 7 weeks in. We were sitting on her back porch in Center Valley, a bottle of wine between us, the kind of evening where you tell each other things. They were hard people, controlling, especially my father. I had to put states between us just to become who I am. She wasn't performing it. Her eyes were steady, a little tired, like someone recounting something she'd made peace with a long time ago, even though saying it out loud still cost her something. "I'm sorry," I said. "What else can you say?" she answered. "It's just not something I talk about much. They won't be at the wedding. I need you to be okay with that." I told her it didn't bother me, and at the time, it was true, because I trusted her. She'd given me no reason not to. What I hadn't accounted for was my own family. Not that they were hostile to Renata, they weren't, not even close. But the Hutchins family operates on a specific frequency, and that frequency includes a deep need to know the people connected to the people we love. It's not nosiness. It's not judgment. We just believe you understand somebody better once you know where they came from, who raised them, what table they sat at as a kid. And by the 10th month of our engagement, The silence around Renata's family had started making its own kind of noise. It came to a head on a Sunday evening in late July. Aunt Ro had made her short ribs, the ones that take all Saturday. And we were all around the table, me, Renata, Cole and his wife, Faith and her husband, the grandkids running around underfoot. Everything was fine until Aunt Ro, who has never once in her life read a room, set down her fork and looked at Renata. Renata, honey, I've got to ask you something. Renata smiled. Sure, Ro. Where's your people? The table went quiet the way it does when somebody finally says the thing everybody's been carefully stepping around. Renata's smile held, but her eyes flickered, just slightly. My parents and I aren't in contact. I've mentioned that. I know you mentioned it. I'm asking about it. Ro wasn't being cruel. She was just being Ro. Because in this family, honey, and I say this with love, you don't marry into a family you've never laid eyes on. It's not how we do things. Ro, my voice, one low word. Ro picked her fork back up. But the question was already on the table, and no amount of short ribs was going to bury it. Later, after Renata had gone home, Cole found me in the garage, wiping down a set of wrenches I didn't need to be wiping down. He leaned against my old workbench, arms crossed, looking so much like his mother it near stopped my heart some days. She's a good woman, Dad. Not a question. She is. I believe that. He nodded slowly. But Dad, we're going to be standing in a church, making promises in front of God and everybody we know, and we're going to do it without ever meeting a single person from her side. Her parents were hard on her, Cole. I believe her. I believe her too. But hard people are still people somewhere. They've got an address. He looked at me hard. I'm not asking you to fix anything. I'm asking you to know what you're walking into. I didn't say anything. I stood in that garage a long time after he left. But here's what you need to understand, I still wasn't suspicious. Not really. Not of Renata. If anything, I was worried about myself. Because the thought I couldn't shake, the one that kept surfacing on my drive home, was this. What if her parents looked at a 62-year-old widower with grown kids and decided I wasn't what they wanted for their daughter? I know how that sounds coming from a man who owns 3 stores and comes from a family like mine. But Renata moved in a specific world, regional sales director for a pharmaceutical distributor, Center Valley condo that looked like a magazine spread, friends who all had opinions about wine regions, and none of them had ever swept a floor for a living. She had a particular polish that I found beautiful, but that sometimes, quietly, made me feel like the loud old hardware man from Bethlehem who didn't know which fork to use. What if her parents were the same? What if they had money, standards, expectations I had no idea about? That was my real fear. Driving north on Route 100 the following Saturday morning, I wasn't expecting to uncover a lie. I wasn't expecting anything to be wrong. I thought I was going to meet intimidating people who might decide I wasn't good enough and that I'd have to stand there and prove I was the man their daughter had chosen. Finding her parents hadn't required a private investigator, just a routine, tedious piece of paperwork. 11 months into our engagement, Renata had moved into a condo unit that technically belongs to one of my rental properties in Center Valley, one Cole manages for the family. Since we were getting married in a matter of weeks, our accountant needed her to formally sign the corporate lease documents for tax purposes. It was sitting on my desk on a Friday afternoon when Cole dropped off the processed paperwork. I glanced down at the official ID she'd uploaded to the portal. Renata Marie Kowalczyk, not Voss, the name she used on social media and had introduced to all my friends. Kowalczyk. Out of plain curiosity, I ran a quick property search under that name. A few clicks turned up an old public record, a dormant Facebook profile untouched since college, and a home address on Larkspur Lane in a small town called Millport, about 90 minutes northeast. That same afternoon, I told Renata I had a property inspection scheduled. She kissed me goodbye without looking up from her laptop. The whole drive, I ran through introductions in my head, quietly dreading the moment somebody opened a door and looked at me like I wasn't what they'd pictured for their daughter. I got off the highway and rolled into Millport just before 10 in the morning. GPS led me into a neighborhood of modest ranch houses, clean streets, American flags on porches, the kind of place where people know their neighbors by name and wave from their driveways. I slowed down. There, it was a well-kept ranch house with a flower bed running along the walkway, and a wind chime on the porch. And in the front yard, moving slow with a garden hose, was an older man in a faded Phillies t-shirt, reading glasses pushed up on his forehead, watering that flower bed with the patient rhythm of a man who had nowhere else more important to be. This wasn't what I'd pictured. I sat in my truck, a full 5 minutes, recalibrating everything. No gate, no luxury car in the driveway. Nothing about this place suggested the people inside had ever spent 1 second wondering if somebody else was good enough for anything. These weren't intimidating people. They were plain, ordinary people. And for one brief, unmistakable moment, I felt real relief. I got out and walked up the path. He saw me when I was about 10 feet off and narrowed his eyes with that careful look people get when a stranger's approaching. "Can I help you with something?" I stopped, took a breath. "Sir, you don't know me. My name's Walter Hutchins. I'm engaged to your daughter, Renata." The man dropped the hose. Not fumbled it, just let it go entirely. Water ran slow across the driveway while he stared at me, and his face did something I was not prepared for at all. It broke open. Not with anger, not with suspicion, with relief. The kind that comes after 2 years of carrying something heavy, finally finding a place to set it down. "Marlene," he said, his voice cracking on the name. "Marlene, come out here." And that's the moment. Standing in the driveway of a house in Millport, watching a retired man try to pull himself together, that my whole understanding of things turned completely over. Inside the Kowalczyk house, everything I thought I knew about Renata started coming apart. Quiet and methodical, over coffee I hadn't asked for, and a plate of cookies Marlene set down with shaking hands. The house was clean, modest, and completely full of Renata. School photos, birthday pictures, a prom photo on the mantle. A college graduation portrait where her father, his name was Ed, I'd learned, stood on one side of her, beaming, his arm around her shoulders, and Marlene on the other, so proud it was almost hard to look at. These weren't the faces of abusive people. These were the faces of parents who missed their daughter. And the story came out slow. Ed had been a UPS driver for 29 years before retiring. Marlene had worked as a receptionist at the Millport dental practice for most of Renata's childhood. They'd helped put her through Penn State full scholarship, covered most of it, but they'd filled every gap so she'd graduate without a dollar of debt to her name. They were proud of that. Deeply proud. When Renata moved to the Lehigh Valley and started climbing in her career, things had changed slowly. The calls got shorter. The visits stopped. She started showing up in photos online under a different name, Voss, her mother's maiden name. She started showing up at events with people Ed and Marlene didn't recognize, wearing a version of herself they didn't quite recognize either. Then came the wedding conversation, the ask for $60,000, Ed's, heartbroken, counteroffer of $10,000, everything they could give without touching their retirement, everything they had to give. Renata's response, "If you can't invest in my future, you're not part of it," blocked that same night. Marlene slid something across the table, a sealed birthday card, stamped, returned to sender in red ink. Renata's handwriting on the return address label. Their address. I sat staring at that red stamp on the envelope, and then slowly pulled my phone from my pocket. I opened the text Renata had sent me the night before. The one I'd read right before falling asleep. The one that had set this whole trip in motion. "Sweetheart, wonderful news. I reached out to my parents. They finally apologized for everything and want to have lunch with you before we leave for the wedding. I'm so excited for you to finally meet them." The kitchen went very quiet. I looked up, slowly. Ed and Marlene were sitting right across from me, completely unaware of the digital reality their daughter was constructing in real time. I turned the phone around and showed them the screen. Marlene read it, set the phone down gently, said nothing. Ed looked out the kitchen window, at the flower bed he'd been watering, when I pulled up. I thought about the drive up, my rehearsed introductions, my quiet dread of not being good enough for these people. I almost laughed. I almost laughed because I'd spent weeks worried Renata's parents would look down on me, that they'd be too refined, too wealthy, too demanding. And here they were, in Millport, in a ranch house, on Larkspur Lane, with a wind chime, a garden hose, and 2 years of unopened birthday cards. The person who'd decided somebody wasn't good enough wasn't them. It was her. It had always been her. And just like that, the man who'd driven up Route 100 nervous about making a good impression, that man was gone. The man who drove back to the Lehigh Valley that afternoon was thinking about something else entirely. The difference between a good liar and a great one is that the great one never breaks character. Not even at the table. Not even while everything is falling apart. I didn't confront her that night. I want to be clear about that, because it matters. I got back to our place a little after 2, sat in my truck for a full 10 minutes, and made a very deliberate decision. Not yet. Not because I was scared. Not because I doubted what I'd just seen and heard in that kitchen, but because I'm my father's son, and my father taught me something about timing that most people get wrong. He used to say, "Walt, the man who reacts first almost never wins. Let them finish the lie. A half-told lie is just an argument. A fully told lie is a confession." I rode the elevator up and stood outside our door a minute. I could hear Renata inside, moving along with the low sound of the television, completely unbothered, completely unaware. I put my key in the lock and went in. She was on the couch with a glass of white wine and her laptop open to a venue website. She looked up and smiled the way she always did, warm, easy, like I was the best part of her day. "How was the inspection?" "Promising," I said. "Long drive, though. You look tired. Want me to order something?" "I want you to explain to me why your mother's birthday card is sitting in a drawer in Millport with our return address stamped and red on it. That's what I wanted. Whatever sounds good is what I said instead." I sat down beside her. She rested her head on my shoulder briefly and went back to looking at venue photos. I stared at the screen without seeing any of it. On the outside, completely normal. On the inside, I was taking the whole thing apart piece by piece. That night I lay in the dark and did what I do when I'm working through something complicated. I separated what I knew from what I assumed and built a timeline. What I knew: Renata's real name was Kowalczyk. Her parents were Ed and Marlene, alive, present, and heartbroken. They hadn't been abusive or controlling in any way that matched what she'd told me. They'd offered $10,000 for the wedding, been told it wasn't enough, and been erased from her life that same night. What I knew: Renata had texted me while sitting in her parents' kitchen, telling me those same parents had apologized and wanted to meet me for lunch. Which meant she was already building the next floor of the lie. Which meant there was a next floor. Which meant somebody was going to be brought to that lunch. Who? That was the question I was trying to answer before I fell asleep. I didn't have to wait long. Over the next 3 days, I listened differently. Not suspiciously, I was careful about that. I didn't check her phone. I didn't follow her. I just listened, the way you listen once you finally understand that every conversation has been running on 2 tracks at once, and you've only been hearing one of them. I noticed she'd started mentioning her boss more than usual, a man named Gordon Ashworth. Gordon thinks, casually, that the Meridian account might close soon. A woman named Diane Ashworth had apparently also been at that same charity fundraiser where we met. Small mentions. Nothing alarming. The kind of thing a person drops into conversation when they're trying to get somebody comfortable with a name before that name has to matter. She was breaking me in. She'd been doing it for weeks, and I'd never noticed. I looked up Gordon Ashworth from my office Monday morning, door shut. Senior Vice President at Renata's pharmaceutical distribution company. His photo on the company site showed a man in his late 50s, silver hair. The kind of easy confidence you only get after decades of never having to explain yourself. His wife, Diane, showed up in a social column about a charity gala in Allentown 2 years back. Polished hair, highlights, the full picture. A wealthy, respectable couple. Exactly the kind of people you'd want at your side if you were trying to convince a traditional Pennsylvania family that you came from somewhere impressive. I leaned back in my chair and stared at that corporate headshot. That's when it hit me. Renata wasn't just a liar. She was trapped in the prison of her own enormous insecurity. She'd spent a decade rebuilding herself in the Lehigh Valley, tailoring her identity to climb a social ladder that my family never cared about, but her corporate friends clearly did. When her father wouldn't sacrifice his retirement for 1 day of theater, it wasn't just a money disagreement to her. In her mind, his modesty threatened the whole polished illusion of wealth she'd sacrificed her real family to build. To keep the lie alive, she hadn't just distanced herself from them. she'd had to erase them completely. I thought about what she must have told the Ashworths to get them to agree to this. Because here's what I know about people like Gordon and Diane Ashworth: they don't get where they are by being careless. For Renata to get them to sit at a lunch table and present themselves as her parents, she'd have needed to give them a story that made sense. Something coherent, something moving enough that two busy, important people would say yes without asking too many questions. What had she told them? I let it sit 2 days, and Thursday morning my phone buzzed with a calendar invite Renata had added to our shared account. Lunch, Gordon and Diane, at the Copper Kettle in Saucon Valley. Saturday, 12:30 p.m. A note underneath. Can't wait for you to finally meet them, honey. This means everything to me. I stared at that note a long time. Means everything to me. I thought about Marlene pressing a sealed birthday card across a kitchen table. I thought about Ed's face when he read that text over my shoulder. Yeah, I figured it did. That Thursday I called Cole from my truck, engine running, parked below my office. He picked up on the second ring. I need to talk to you. Come by the house. 20 minutes later, I was sitting at my kitchen table in Emmaus, the same table where Renata had charmed Aunt Ro, where Ro had asked her question, where everything had seemed completely normal 2 weeks earlier. And I told him all of it. Millport, Ed and Marlene, the birthday card, the text, Gordon and Diane Ashworth. Cole sat across from me with his hands folded and listened without interrupting once. When I finished, the kitchen sat quiet a moment. Then he said, "What do you need?" 4 words. That's it. No lecture. No dramatic reaction. "I need to make that lunch," I said. "I need to build something bigger." Cole nodded slowly. "And the Kowalczyks? I'm going back to Millport after the lunch. I want to know if they're willing to be part of what comes next." He looked at me hard. "And what comes after that?" "A dinner," I said. "A real gathering, with the right people in the room." Another pause. Then Cole stood up, straightened his jacket, and said, "I'll talk to Aunt Ro about the restaurant." That was the whole conversation. Ro's reaction was a little less contained. She came in from the living room, where she'd apparently been listening to the whole thing, which in our house doesn't count as eavesdropping, that's just being present, and stood in the doorway with her arms crossed and an expression I can only describe as the specific fury of a woman who fed someone her short ribs and then got lied to. "Marlene," Ro said. "That poor woman sitting in Millport with a birthday card that got sent back unopened." "I know, Ro." She stared at me a long moment. Then she came over and put both hands on my face. The same move she's been doing since I was 4 years old and needed her full attention. "You fixed it," she said quietly. "Not just for you. For them too." Saturday came. The Copper Kettle in Saucon Valley is the kind of place where the lighting's designed to make everyone look a little more important than they actually are. Renata had made the reservation. I got there 5 minutes early, like clockwork, and sat facing the door. They walked in together, Renata in the middle. One arm looped through Gordon Ashworth's, Diane at her other side. Renata was glowing. Gordon moved, with the ease of a man who'd never once questioned whether he belonged anywhere. Diane wore polite smiles and careful posture. I stood when they reached the table. Big smile, firm handshake. "Dad," Renata said, her voice touched with a particular triumph. "This is my dad, Gordon, and my mom, Diane." Gordon, Diane. Not Ed, not Marlene. I shook both their hands. "I've heard so much about you both." I hadn't heard anything about them, because they hadn't existed in this role until about a week ago. We sat, open menus, and for the next 20 minutes I watched Renata perform with a fluency that, under any other circumstances, would have genuinely impressed me. She laughed at Gordon's remarks half a second too fast. She referenced shared memories with Diane. Trips, restaurants, family moments got mentioned, and Diane followed along carefully, the way someone does when they're working from a script they only half know by heart. Gordon was smoother. He asked me questions about the hardware business, made sharp comments about the Lehigh Valley commercial market, generally carried himself like a man who'd done his homework and meant to be convincing. Everyone was performing. The whole table was a stage, and I sat there eating grilled trout, being absolutely charming. "So, Gordon," I said, setting my fork down with the relaxed calm of a man without a care in the world. Renata's told me so much about you. You've clearly had a huge presence in her life. Gordon smiled. She's been like family to us. Like family. That's everything. That means a great deal to us, I said, looking at Renata as I said it. She gave me that same radiant smile back. Keep smiling, sweetheart. I'm going to be straight with you both, I continued, leaning in slightly. The way I do in negotiations when I want somebody to feel like I'm letting them in on something. My family takes things seriously, formal matters especially. My kids would never forgive me if we didn't do this the right way. I paused. We'd love to host an engagement dinner next Saturday, nothing extravagant. Family, good food, a toast. My family just needs to welcome the people who matter to Renata before we get to the altar. Gordon glanced at Diane. Half a second of silent calculation. We'd be honored. Renata grabbed my hand under the table so fast I felt it in my shoulder. Perfect, I said. I smiled at her. She smiled back. Full, radiant, triumphant, the smile of a woman who believes she's already won. The trap was built. She just walked in smiling. If you've been with me a while, drop a comment below. While you're at it, hit that like button and make sure you're subscribed. Over the next 6 days, I moved quiet and precise. Monday, I went back to Millport. I called Ed from the driveway before I even knocked. He opened the door before I finished knocking. We sat in the same kitchen, same coffee, same table. I told them about the lunch, about Gordon and Diane, about the performance, about the engagement dinner I'd arranged. I told them I wanted them there. Marlene's hands went still around her mug. Walt, we don't want to cause a scene. Marlene, I looked at her directly. My family is going to stand in a church and welcome whoever walks through those doors as family. She deserves to know who she really is. I paused. And you've spent 2 years sending birthday cards that came back unopened. You deserve to be in that room. Not for drama. Because you're her parents, and somebody has to say it out loud. Ed leaned over and covered Marlene's hand with his own. He looked at me. What time should we be there? Tuesday, I sat with Cole and Aunt Ro in my den and walked them through every detail. Cole listened, asked 2 sharp questions, then said, I'll handle the restaurant. He picked up the phone, and that was that. Ro's reaction needed immediate containment. I want to say something to her at the door. She growled, narrowing her eyes. No, Ro, don't say a single word, I told her, putting both hands on her shoulders. I need you to do something that's going to be the hardest thing you've ever done. Not one word until I stand up to make the toast. She looked at the ceiling, then at me, chewing the inside of her cheek. Fine, she finally hissed. But I want a double helping of the short ribs before anybody else sits down, and I'm holding the door on the way out. I looked at her and nodded. That I can arrange. All the pieces were in place. The Bellamy house in Bethlehem, Cole's choice was a good one. A restaurant that felt like somebody's home, not a stage set. Private dining room in the back, white tablecloths, candles, warm light. Aunt Ro handled the menu personally and added a small framed photo of my parents to the welcome table, because in her words, they ought to be there too. Ed and Marlene drove down from Millport Saturday morning and checked into a hotel in Bethlehem. Ed called me Thursday night to confirm. His voice was steady and careful, and at the end of the call, after we'd gone over the details, he said quietly, Walt, whatever happens tomorrow in that room, thank you for driving up to Millport. For knocking on that door. A pause. You chose well, even if she doesn't know it yet. I didn't know what to say to that, so I just told him, see you tomorrow, Ed. I pressed my suit Friday night. I got into bed beside Renata, already asleep, already dreaming some version of tomorrow she'd built in her head. I lay in the dark, staring at the ceiling, and thought about a man in a faded Phillies shirt watering a flower bed on Larkspur Lane. A birthday card sealed with a red stamp on the front. A kitchen table where 2 people had been quietly waiting 2 years for somebody to finally show up. Somebody was going to show up tomorrow. So were they. You can build a lie as tall as you want, but the moment the right people walk through the door, all of it comes down. That Saturday morning, I woke with a stillness that doesn't come from peace, it comes from certainty. I lay there a few minutes listening to Renata in the bathroom, the shower, the hair dryer, the particular rhythm of a woman getting ready for a performance she believes she's already won. And I thought about Ed pressing his good navy jacket in a hotel room in Bethlehem. Marlene in front of a mirror, trying to hold herself together. Two people who'd driven 90 minutes down, Route 100 for a dinner. Their own daughter had no idea they'd been invited to. Get up, Walt. Let's finish this. Renata took 3 hours to get ready. 3 hours. I sat in the den watching football highlights with the volume down low and let her have every minute of it. She came out twice to ask my opinion, once about earrings, once about shoes, and both times I told her she looked beautiful, because she did. That was never the problem. The problem was everything hiding underneath the beauty. She wanted to leave early to check the setup. I told her to go ahead, that I had a quick call to make, and I'd meet her there. She kissed my cheek, grabbed her coat, and walked out, looking like everything in her life was perfectly arranged. The second the door closed, I picked up my phone and called Ed. He answered on the first ring. "You ready?" I asked. "We're ready." His voice was calm, steady, the voice of a man who'd made his decision. "Marlene's dressed. We're ready. Good. When I text you, you walk in. Doesn't matter what's happening at that table. You just walk in and stand there. You don't have to say a word." A pause. "Ed, yeah, she's going to see you the second that door opens." "I know. I just want you prepared for that." His voice stopped me cold. "I've been preparing for 2 years. I've been ready since the night she blocked us. I've been ready every birthday since, when the phone never rang." Another pause, shorter. "We'll be there." I held the phone a second after he hung up. Then I put my jacket on, checked the ring box in my inside pocket, and walked out the door. The Bellamy house on a Saturday night is exactly what it should be. Warm, welcoming, the smell of rosemary and garlic greeting you at the door like an old friend. But the private dining room in back runs on a different frequency. Quieter, deliberate, white tablecloths, low light, round tables arranged so everyone can see everyone. Aunt Ro had been there since 4 o'clock. When I walked in at 6:30, she was adjusting the centerpiece flowers with the focused energy of a woman who understands that the details of a room tell people exactly how seriously you're taking this. She looked up when I came in and studied my face the way she has since I was old enough to have something to hide. "You okay?" "I'm okay, Ro. You sure?" "I'm sure." She crossed the room and put both hands on my face, looking at me a long moment. "Your father," she said quietly, "used to say the truth always finds the most inconvenient moment, even when nobody invited it." She straightened my collar. "Let it sit tonight." I nearly lost it right there. Nearly. Cole stood near the bar talking to his wife, already dressed in his dark gray suit, completely calm. He looked at me as I walked over. A slow nod. That nod said, "Everything's ready, the room's set, do what you need to do." They arrived at 7. I heard Renata's laugh in the hallway before the door even opened, that particular social laugh, half a register higher than her real one, the one she uses when she wants a room to feel like a party before she's even walked into it. She came in first, navy dress, hair perfect, every detail in place. Gordon Ashworth followed behind her. Silver-haired, expensive suit, moving with the natural authority of a man who's never doubted his right to be anywhere. Diane beside him, elegant and polished, pearls at her collar. Renata moved through that room like she owned it. She kissed Ro on both cheeks, shook Cole's hand with both of hers, laughed at something Diane said near the drinks table and touched her arm warmly. She was magnificent, genuinely, terrifyingly magnificent. When she reached my side, she slid her arm through mine and leaned in close. "This is perfect," she whispered. "Your family is incredible. This is everything I wanted." "I know," I said. "That's why I did it." She heard a compliment. I meant something else entirely. We sat. Food came. Roasted chicken, short ribs, a spread Ro had personally designed. Warm bread in a cloth-lined basket. The table filled with the noise of what looked like a real family dinner. Gordon was warm and attentive, asking Cole about the business with what looked like genuine interest. Diane complimented Ro on the restaurant choice, and Ro accepted the compliment graciously while privately thinking things I'll never fully understand. Renata was glowing, relaxed, victorious. I ate. I laughed at the right moments. I refilled glasses, asked questions, and to anyone watching, I was a completely relaxed man, enjoying a family dinner. My phone sat face down in my jacket pocket. I had one text to send. I was waiting for the right moment. That moment came at 7:52, in the short lull between the entree and whatever was supposed to come next. The table was warm, the wine was flowing, and Renata was laughing at something Gordon had said. I pulled out my phone and typed one word to Ed. Then I stood and tapped my knife against my glass. That clean, clear sound that tells a room, stop, listen. The table settled. Renata looked up at me with that same full, radiant smile, the smile of a woman who thinks the next 60 seconds are going to be a toast about how much I love her. I let the silence stretch one beat longer than felt comfortable. I want to thank everybody for being here tonight. My voice was calm, measured, the way my father used to talk when something really mattered in our family. A dinner like this isn't just a nice evening, it's a statement. It's us saying, these people are real, these people matter. We don't say that lightly. I looked slowly around the table. My father taught me that the people you invite to your table tell the whole world who you really are. I paused. So I want to make sure tonight we've got the right people in this room. I looked at Marco, the restaurant manager standing near the back wall. He'd been briefed. He knew his cue. He walked to the side door and opened it, and Ed and Marlene Kowalczyk walked in. Ed in his navy jacket, the one that didn't fit quite like it used to, the kind you could tell he'd owned for years and saved for occasions that mattered. Marlene in a burgundy dress, a small purse held with both hands, chin up, moving with the quiet dignity of a woman who had decided she was not going to fall apart in public no matter what happened next. They crossed into the silence of that room, and Renata saw them. I was watching her face. I'd positioned myself specifically to watch her face. The color drained like a tide, pulling out fast. Total. Complete. Her lips parted. Her hand, the one holding her wine glass, went completely still. The glass tipped. I leaned over without looking at her and steadied it. Set it down gently on the linen. She turned to me. Her eyes were doing the fast math of somebody searching for the story that saves her. I could see it happening in real time. Looking for the exit, the angle, whatever version of this she could still control. Walt? Her voice came out thin, almost nothing. I went to Millport, I said quietly, not loud. I wasn't performing for the room. I talked to your parents 3 weeks ago. I drove up Route 100 on a Saturday morning because I told myself, maybe I can fix this for her. Maybe I can give her family back as a wedding gift. I let that land. I found a man watering his garden on Larkspur Lane in a Phillies shirt. I told him my name and he dropped the hose. The room had gone tight with tension. Renata, your father drove a UPS truck for 29 years. Your mother worked the front desk at a dental office through most of your childhood. They helped put you through Penn State, and they did it without you owing a single dollar in debt because they wanted you to have everything. My voice stayed even, steady. They offered you $10,000 from their retirement, and you told them if they couldn't fund your life, they didn't have a place in it. She opened her mouth. You don't understand everything that happened when I sat in their kitchen. I said it quiet, like a door closing. I saw your school photos on the refrigerator. I held the birthday card you mailed to our address, unopened. And while I was sitting there, you texted me telling me your parents had apologized and wanted to meet me for lunch. I turned to Gordon and Diane Ashworth. Diane had both hands flat on the table in front of her, face completely pale. Gordon had gone entirely still. Gordon, Diane, my voice shifted, something calm and respectful. I know exactly what she told you. She told you my family was deeply judgmental, that her real parents had passed away years ago, and she asked you to play family for a day so she wouldn't have to face a traditional wedding alone. She used your kindness and your standing as a prop to fill 2 empty chairs on a stage. I gestured to Ed and Marlene standing near the door. But those are her real parents. Diane looked at Renata, one long, slow look that didn't need words because words wouldn't have been enough anyway. Then she looked at Ed and Marlene, and something crossed her face that was far worse than anger. It was recognition, the specific recognition of a woman who'd just understood the person she thought she knew doesn't exist. Gordon didn't say anything. He folded his napkin, set it on the table. the gesture of a man leaving who's decided there's nothing worth saying first. I turned to Renata one last time. She'd stopped looking for the exit. There wasn't one, and she knew it. She just looked at me, eyes bright, jaw tight. The whole architecture of everything she'd built was reflected back at her in every face in that room. I grew up watching my father treat people, all people, like they mattered. The man who parks the cars, the woman who cleans the office, the retired UPS driver from Millport who gave everything and got told it wasn't enough. I reached into my jacket pocket. That's the measure I was raised on. Not the address, not the job title, not the clothes. I looked at her. By that measure, I don't know who you are. I pulled the ring from my pocket, set it on the white linen tablecloth in front of her. Not thrown, not dramatic. Just placed, quietly, the way you set something down after you've carried it too long and you're finally ready to let it go for good. Then I picked up the flower centerpiece sitting in the middle of our table. White flowers, simple, rose choice. I crossed the room to where Marlene was standing. She was fighting it. You could see the effort in her jaw, her shoulders, the careful way she was breathing short and controlled, the way people breathe when they're holding something enormous and can't afford to drop it in public. I offered her the flowers. She looked at them, looked at me, then looked at Ed, who had driven 90 minutes down Route 100, wearing his best dress, chin held high through the hardest walk of her life. She took the flowers and completely broke down. Not a scream, a whisper, the kind that comes after 2 years of accumulated grief finally finding somewhere to land. Ed put his arm around her before she could make the first sound. His jaw tight, eyes wet, chin steady. He pulled her close and looked at me over her head. And then he did something I didn't expect. He stepped forward. One step. Marlene still tucked under his arm, and he held out his free hand. I shook it. He gripped it hard. The grip of a man saying something his voice still couldn't fully manage. I held it a moment, then stepped back. My son was beside me. I don't know exactly when he'd moved. Cole shows up when it matters. That's just what he does. He looked at Ed a moment, then stepped forward and put out his hand. I'm Cole, he said. We should have met you a long time ago. I'm sorry. Ed shook his hand and swallowed once. Ed. A breath. Thank you for raising a man like that. Cole glanced at me sideways. Just a second. Just long enough. In 35 years, I'd never seen my son look at me quite like that. Aunt Ro didn't shake Marlene's hand. She pulled her into a full hug. Both arms, immediate, unconditional, the way women in our family hug the people who need to be held. Marlene clung to her. The flowers were still in her hands. We walked out together, Ro, Cole, and the Kowalczyks. Ro's arm was linked through Marlene's. Cole and Ed walked side by side with the quiet ease of two men who'd just recognized something in each other. Aunt Ro paused at the front door. She only turned around once. I looked back too. Renata was sitting at the center of that table in her perfect dress, in her perfectly built life, the ring on the linen in front of her, the centerpiece gone. Gordon and Diane Ashworth stood at the back of the room. Diane already had her coat on, Gordon's hand at her back, neither one looking at Renata as they moved toward the exit. Her friends, the polished social circle she'd built, performed for, constructed her entire second identity around, sat frozen in their chairs with the particular discomfort of people who've just witnessed something they can't unsee and don't know what to do with their hands. Nobody went to her. Nobody pulled her aside. Nobody offered a version of events that made her look better. Nobody played the part she needed because there weren't any parts left to play. The whole cast had left. She just sat there, like she'd finally, irreversibly been seen. Ro looked at her a long moment, then shook her head once, slow, almost sad, and let the door close behind her. Outside, on the sidewalk, in the cold, clean air of a September night, downtown Bethlehem moved around us like it had no idea what had just happened inside that restaurant. I stood next to my son and took a deep breath. He put his hand on the back of my neck, something he's done since he was a boy. He didn't say anything for a moment. Then, Mom would have done the same thing. That was it. That was all, he said. Across the sidewalk, Ed Kowalczyk was looking out at the Bethlehem skyline with Marlene tucked under his arm, the white flowers still in her hands. They breathed the same cold September air, like people who'd just been handed back something they'd stopped hoping to see again. Ed caught me looking. He nodded once, not a thank you. Something there wasn't quite a word for. I nodded back. Some deals close for profit. Some you close because there's no version of yourself you can live with if you walk away from the table. That night, I closed the most important deal of my life. And I didn't make a dime. Some women lie to erase the people who loved them. She built a whole life on that erasure. And one Saturday night in September, in a private dining room at the Bellamy House in downtown Bethlehem, every single floor of it came down. If you like this story, hit that like button, subscribe, and drop a comment below telling me where you're watching from tonight. I'll see you in the next one. The measure of a person was never their address or their bank account. It was whether they still watered the flowers while waiting for someone to come home. Ed and Marlene never stopped loving a daughter who stopped answering. That's the quiet miracle of real family. It keeps the porch light on, keeps a seat at the table, long after it makes any logical sense to. Love that patient always finds its way back to the table eventually. A small note for you. This story was written and fictionalized by AI for entertainment purposes, while still hoping to leave you with a genuine, positive lesson to carry into your own life.